Now, everybody, welcome to a special edition, and by the word special, I mean totally special. This is the first crossover episode ever of LOTRO Players News and DDO Players News. We are crossing the streams, as it were.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the stream.
Why?
It would be bad.
I'm fuzzy on the whole good-bad thing. What do you mean bad?
Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal. All right, that's bad.
And combining the two shows together. I am your host, Drac, from DDO Players. Also from DDO Players and LOTRO Players is a voice you are all familiar with, Mr. Pineleaf.
Hello there.
And we have Teriadwyn, also from LOTRO Players News.
Hi.
We have quite a few guests from Standing Stone Games as well. First up, we have the community manager, that's easy for me to say, Cordovan.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And thanks for coming back on the show, as always. And we got a couple first-time guests to the program here. We have Bill Champagne, also known as Darth Celtics, over on the LOTRO forums. He is the lead QA and also the music composer, which is kind of why we want to talk to him.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And then also we have DDO content designer and semi-music. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Artemist with us.
Hi there.
How are you this evening?
Very good. And you?
I am not bad. Ready to get some information out of you. So be ready.
Yeah, I'm ready too.
Well, that's good. All right. Well, we're going to start off easy for you guys. We'll start off with Bill first here. The first-time guest on both of our podcasts, we have a little ritual that we do. We simply ask you about your history with Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, Dungeons & Dragons, and then, ergo, Lord of the Rings Online and DDO.
Okay, so Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, I was first introduced to in high school. Actually, I had read The Hobbit when I was younger, but I really never got into Lord of the Rings then. And then around the time that the movies came out, I decided that I wanted to read the books. And I fell in love with the lore and the IP and all that stuff. Dungeons and Dragons, I didn't actually know anything about until maybe 4 or 5 years back. I knew that it was a thing that my friends played. But the extent of my knowledge now is mostly from reading a bunch of Dragonlance Chronicles books. And I've read maybe like a dozen of those. And honestly, I've absolutely fallen in love with the books, and I have a nice big musical project planned around them.
Sweet.
So yeah, I mean, but that's like a multi-year project in my spare time. So that's how I came to know all those.
And then how about the games then?
So, yeah. Okay, so LOTRO, I started out as a temp QA tester in February of 2008, so it's been a little bit over 13 years now. The only online game I'd played before was Star Wars Galaxies. And apparently I knew enough to get hired by the team. I've been on LOTRO ever since. I did a little bit of DDO testing way back around the time of free to play, which was like 2009. And then I hadn't touched it in many, many, many years until Sean came about and there was a need for some music. So I've been working on DDO now for music ever since then.
Okay, how about you, Artemis?
So my story in regards to my relationship with the two properties here is actually kind of similar to Bill's. I didn't really have much familiarity with D&D before I started at Standing Stone Games. I had what's kind of funny and ironic is that my friend group when I was in college a few years back, they started playing D&D together, and I was kind of busy applying for grad school and everything, so I was just kind of like, I'm sorry, I can't join you, but I hope you have fun. And I would sit in on a few sessions with them, but wasn't really into it myself in terms of being super involved, even though I would have fun hanging out with them when they were doing it. So it was just kind of ironic that I later got an internship with Dungeons and Dragons Online that same year. So I started out as an intern with SSG for one summer before my senior year of college, and then they liked me enough to bring me back the next summer, and I had been, working part-time with them as extra support and content design and everything like that part-time while I was in grad school. And this past year, was my first year being like full time, which I'm still super grateful for, because it was just such a kind of lucky opportunity that I had at the time. You know, finding games jobs and getting your foot in the door is always just kind of like the monumental first step for a lot of people.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to have people who sort of like wanted to, who wanted to support me and help me and like train me to learn up on all this stuff. Since then, when I was an intern, I know I kind of jumped around through your questions and skipped ahead a little bit.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
we can work.
I guess
with that.
Going back to the Lord of the Rings stuff, I had like a sort of passing familiarity with it. I haven't read the books, to be honest. I did enjoy what I've seen of the movies, which was the first one. Not a whole lot, but you know, since I've been working mostly on Dungeons and Dragons, I've been learning more and more about the game on the DDO side, not so much on the LOTRO side, but it's definitely something that I have an interest in for someday.
All right, let's get to start talking on the music talk here. So, Bill, I'm pretty sure this is not your first rodeo with music composing. Pretty sure you just no. I'm pretty sure you just didn't walk in and say, "I'm going to write some music for this video game." Yep. See what it tells us about your history with that a little bit.
Yeah. So my introduction to music. As this is gonna sound strange, but it started in the womb. Like my parents played for me a lot of 70s prog rock. And like I grew up with like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Yes. And all these fantastic musical acts. And then I basically self-taught myself piano and guitar. I played trumpet and horn all through high school and into college, and it was around my senior year of high school. Like, I mean, I'd been in bands and stuff, but it was in my senior year of high school that I actually began to write for orchestra. And then all through college, I studied music at school, and for a long time, composing was just like a passion. It was a thing I did on the side for fun. You end up writing a lot of music that nobody ever plays because unless your name is Beethoven or Mozart, like the Boston Symphony isn't going to play your music. So like you end up with a whole bunch of stuff that just sits on your computer, but it's fine. Like it's all great practice. And at some point, composing became a job, and I'm thrilled about that.
That's an awesome back history you have. I didn't realize some of that you just kind of self-taught yourself. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so to be fair, I did take piano lessons, but like that was after I had already like started to teach myself things.
Okay. So video games and music, I never really, to be honest, cared about music in a video game until Castlevania. Okay. And then I totally fell in love with the whole music part of games. And I haven't looked back since. And now I make sure I always have my music volume up on games, and I'll download the soundtracks or buy the soundtracks or what have you. So in your opinion, how important is it actually to have music in video games?
Music for me is probably 70 to 80% of the game. Like, I was the kid who would sit in front of the TV with my box and just record game soundtracks onto cassette tape to play them back. So for me, I'm like you. I fell in love with Castlevania, Mega Man, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, all those. And like to this day, I want to say maybe 50% of my iTunes is video game stuff. I just can't get enough of it. And there's so much amazing stuff out there.
Oh, I agree.
And like in so many people don't realize just how important it is in like just crafting the sound of the game and giving it its feel.
Yeah, and we're hopefully going to get into that a little bit later here about for both games. But just in your kind of view, how are the games' music different to create for?
Dungeons and Dragons Online has a lot more direction than LOTRO does. I don't want to say it's an issue of trust, because it's not. They just have a much better idea of what exactly they want on DDO. With LOTRO, I can kind of do my own thing, and my judgment is usually pretty on spot. It's just more traditional fantasy stuff. DDO, they ask for a bunch of strange combos, and it's a lot more interesting to say, okay, well, now we want Tchaikovsky. Okay, well, let's do Tchaikovsky.
The The range of what you can do just amazes me, though. Just, hearing the soundtracks for both games, it's like you do so much different stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I like to think that that's just growing up with a lot of different styles of music. And I mean, I have appreciation for most genres. And yeah, like just listening to a bunch of stuff, you basically learn as you go, and you see what works and what doesn't. And if you don't know something, then you study it until you do know it.
And then I think Terry had a question for you.
I did, but actually, Darth Celtics has been doing a lot of talking, and I was kind of wondering if Artemist had an answer to that last question.
No worries. I guess what I would say in terms of if the question that we're talking about here is the one about LOTRO versus DDO.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't have as much familiarity with LOTRO because most of my life and my energy is consumed by the Dungeons and Dragons side. I haven't had much of an opportunity for crossover, but kind of speaking on more of that variety and the very the specificity, I guess you could say, of the tasks that we give Bill. It's very interesting to me because it kind of brings me back to my wrong preconceptions of what Dungeons and Dragons is before I started learning about it and really kind of delving in. I had in my head this imagination that Dungeons and Dragons was all the, I guess you could say, generic fantasy, save the princess, go to the castle, slay the dragon type of storytelling. And immediately when I joined, my first project was Curse of Strahd.
Oh, jeez. Oh, good grief.
That couldn't be any different from that. And it really kind of turned my view of the game around, and I started to imagine all the different possibilities that you could do with storytelling and everything in the game, which is my passion. And I think speaking back to the musical side of that, we have, jazzy, triumphant trumpets and violins and stuff like that for somewhere like Sharn, which the idea behind that was to sort of showcase the promise and, I guess you could say, bravado of the city, and how a lot of people view it as an outside perspective as a land of opportunity and prosperity, like 1920s New York would have been. But also then when you go down into the cogs and you hear the kind of oppressive sound that we had as a backdrop for that setting, it kind of shows the reality of the place in a way that contrasts so much from what you get on the surface. And I think that the fact that our setting in DDO is mostly Eberron, and that there's a lot of creative freedom in terms of the settings and theming that we have going on over here, it really gives a lot of creative freedom, I think, but maybe in a way that's more focused on a specific theme for the content that we're working on in that specific update. That makes any sense.
No, yeah, totally.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So my other question for both of you, is there just a musical go-to that you turn to when you just need to listen to something for inspiration? You're working on something and you've gotten in a rut, or you just don't want to think about gaming, but you still want to listen to something that's maybe going to kick some thoughts into gear. Is there just something in particular that you have that's always in your wheelhouse?
There's just an impossible amount of things. First and almost, basically anything by John Williams. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I grew up with the films and the music, and that's what got me composing in the first place. So that's always a well. In the game world, and anything by Uematsu. And recently, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is one that I go back to over and over and over again because the music is just so
amazing soundtrack. I agree.
I mean, it's arguably the best game soundtrack ever made, and that's no small thing. They did an incredible job.
Yeah, I guess on my end, I don't really know if I have a specific focus for when I'm working on stuff. I think it depends on what I'm working on that day. I can't listen to anything while I'm writing because it just kind of messes with my head. But when I'm doing just general level design and stuff like that, I'll try and have just music going on in the background. But if I'm trying to really kind of relax and focus, this is going to sound really oddly specific, but I have one song from the Stardew Valley soundtrack that I always kind of play on loop.
Which I can understand, because that's kind of a cool little soundtrack. It's different than a lot of games, so I could see that.
Yeah,
weirdly
I
super
love
relaxing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's super relaxing and chill for sure.
Mm-hmm. I love the music from the fall season. It's just some of the best music that I have heard in a game. And I can't remember which of the, I think 3 or 4 songs that are just kind of like the backing ambient tracks. I kind of cycle through them. There was one of them was my favorite that sometimes I would just play on loop, and I'd be having a relaxing day with a candle, listening to my Stardew Valley and hammering out some bugs in my content.
Nice.
I'm still blown away that one person developed that entire game. Like, I mean,
know.
for someone to have all of the skills required to do the engineering, the artwork, the music, like, it's just, I can't even fathom having that many skills in one place.
Yeah, it was truly a labor of love. I think I saw in an interview that it took him like an entire decade to develop, and just everything that I've seen about the creator online just makes him seem like a very kind of like genuinely nice guy who's just really kind of excited that everyone in the world has such a nice and like such a positive interest in something that he just kind of had as like a little like personal project that he was.
It's an amazing game.
It is. Yeah, it is.
For sure.
Speaking of games, let's get into LOTRO. You kind of brought it up a little earlier. You are the lead QA person. So how did you compose that into I'm going to do music as well?
So I originally got into it with the hopes of getting into the sound department. Like, I mean, everyone who I talked to said, like, start on the ground floor, work in QA, learn about the industry, make connections, work your way up. The thing about the sound department at a game company is nobody ever wants to leave it because I mean, why would you?
Right.
So I had been there for maybe 6 or 7 years. I think it was around 2015 when I started to actually do some music for the game. I was working with the sound team to get a track into the game for Paths of the Dead. And then the sound team got laid off. And like, we didn't really have anyone to do the majority of the music in-house. I want to say from maybe update 19 on. So we did have one audio guy, and he helped me get my first piece of music into the game, which was Horn of Gondor. It plays in Minas Tirith. And like, he worked with me. He helped me with the mixing and all that other stuff. Gave me some tips on how to improve it. And then he at some point got laid off too, and we truly had nobody. So I talked to at the time the creative art director and the lead designer we had, and I'm like, guys, we don't have anyone to do the music. They wanted me to reuse stuff from old areas, and I just don't like doing that. So I said, in my spare time, just let me do this. And for a couple of years, it was basically all done on my own time at home with my own tools and stuff.
Wow.
And it was a lot of after hours work. It was a lot of before hours work. And I mean, I have an hour commute each way to the office. So it was a lot of work, but it was something that I enjoyed doing because, like, getting to hear my stuff in a game was a dream come true. So yeah, and from there, like, after Horn of Gondor, I created 4 pieces for the Belfast housing zone. And then after that, with the exception of, like, I did part of Mordor, Chance Thomas did the other half, but everything beyond that has all been me since, like, I mean, they've seen that I can do the job and they're happy with the work that I do. So yeah, it just became part of the thing that I do as my daily work.
So Gondor would have been like the first thing that you worked on?
Yes. Yep. I only did the one track. The rest of it was done by Matt Harwood. But yeah, that was the first track that I got into the game itself. So.
And then
what is the track called?
Horn of Gondor.
And it plays in Minas Tirith.
Yes.
Okay.
Go.
Is that the one where you have the horns blowing to announce Aragorn just before the March of the King, or is this an earlier point?
No. It's just an ambient track.
Okay, just an ambient track.
That plays in the background. Yeah.
Okay.
It has a lot of horn.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, with the name like Horn of Gondor, I would hope it has a little bit of words.
I mean, that is one of the tracks of mine. I mean, we've released most of my music onto YouTube. That's one of the early ones.
Because I love the Scarhold sound. Like the big triumphant track that plays when you're running around in Scarhold. I love that track.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great to hear the stuff up on YouTube, and we're always trying to find ways that we can get this out there. But I mean, it takes time. But yeah, like that's one of the early tracks that we don't have up there yet. I'm hoping that at some point we can get more of the older stuff up, but that requires time.
And if I can find that, I'm going to try to promise this, but I don't know if I can find that, I'll kind of splice it in so people can kind of hear that, but I don't know where to look.
If you want the sound file, I can probably send that over.
Oh, cool. That would be amazing. Yeah, I can splice it in so people can hear what we're talking about. And then on LOTRO, when you go about to compose something, do they say we want this, or do they just tell you, okay, here is like the layout of the area, like if you're doing, ambient music, or here's the quest, we want some music to go with this, or how does that work?
Right. So one nice thing about actually testing the game is I actually get to go in there and play it and see all of the zones as they're being built. I take a bunch of screenshots of the area just to use for inspiration. And then I basically just asked the world builds and stuff, give me 5 buzzwords for this zone. Is it sad? Is it marshy? Is it bright? Just something for me to go on to sort of nail the sound. And once I have that, I come up with a list of all of the tracks that I need. It can range anywhere from 10 to 20 for just a small update. And God, I think the Minas Morgul expansion had 56 tracks. So we have a list. And I just go through track by track. Always right is the main theme for the zone because I want each zone to have its own theme. And then from there, I'll see which characters need themes, which events, and then I'll just go about it track by track. The way I usually work is that I'll compose it first, then I'll put it aside for a week. And then I'll go back to it the week after to orchestrate and do all the mixing and mastering and stuff. Just so it gives me a sense of do I still like this after I put some distance between it and myself. I don't like to do one track in a day and be done.
Is there any specific amount of time that it takes, or does it just vary? Per se, can you nail something out in maybe 2 days, or does it take longer than that, or does it just depend kind of what you're working on?
A combat track that only has to be 30 seconds to a minute long, those for the most part go pretty quickly. That could be a morning. Some tracks are a lot longer, some require a lot more thought. And mostly I'd say that it doesn't take longer than a day to do a track. Just compose it. Occasionally it'll take me 2 or 3 if I get stuck. But then even when I'm stuck on that, I can still go and do other things in other tracks to break things up. And
then are you limited with LOTRO to the musical style or the musical instruments you can choose from? Because I know just, the 2 games, which we'll talk about DDO here in a second, is radically different in music style. So what's your kind of groundwork that you have to work with there?
I've been told I can't use piano because it's anachronistic. It makes me sad because I love piano. But I absolutely cannot use piano because they don't exist in the Lord of the Rings world. We end up substituting dulcimer instead. Even in terms of style, I want to say from maybe the Veils of the Anduin on, I've been trying to add a lot more color in, a lot more, try to move more from high fantasy and give it more of a Debussy, just a lot more colorful chords and stuff, and I wasn't sure how it would go over, but like the main lore guy, he loved it. So I always try to introduce new things and see like how far I can push it, still while still staying in like the high fantasy genre.
Right. Okay.
Do you have a specific track that is your favorite in LOTRO?
I do. Life of me, I can't remember what it's called. Because like there have been so many, but let me see if I can pull it up real quick, and I will get back to you on that.
And while you're doing that, I just kind of thought of another question too. Do you come up with the names for your tracks, or do you just write the music and then say somebody else, I don't know who it would be, come up, this would be a great name for this, or do you kind of have the name in mind as well?
I'm not good at naming things. I generally hand that off to the team. I think I named a few of the early tracks maybe for update 22, and like they weren't the best names, so I'll hand it off to the content team and the people who design the quests, and they generally have a lot more colorful names that aren't so generic. Okay, so the track is Valley Nourished by the Great River. It was from the Vales of Anduin soundtrack. I think it's the second track on it.
Let's get over to Dungeons & Dragons Online then. Kind of a little bit of the same questions. And Artemis, you can chime in here too, because I know you've done some work. I don't know if you've done anything other than the raid, which we'll talk about here in a second. But when did you guys start working on the music for DDO? And what's the first piece that you did that we would know, we can say, hey, I know who composed that now?
So the first thing I did for DDO, I don't think I've actually made it into the game. I was asked to compose like a pipe organ piece. I don't remember what it was for. It was for Ravenloft, I believe. And I don't think it ever ended up going in. So the first thing I actually did for DDO was during Sean. I did like some industrial type track, and I did like sort of a film noir track, and then I did sort of like a Copeland-esque thing. And yeah, like that was my first experience really with DDO.
The Sharn soundtrack was so at the time different than anything else from DDO. I commented, I don't know, Pineleaf probably got tired of me saying it every time we were playing. I'm like, oh my God, I love this music. This music is so awesome.
Yeah, no, I was actually blown away by the stuff that Matt Harwood did, because at the time, like I was still trying to get a handle on making my stuff sound at a professional level, and his stuff just sounded so darn good. I'm like, geez, like
how do I compete with this, right?
Yeah, like I mean, it sounds so good, and to me, mine, like in comparison, just sounded just hollow and empty. So I've just been trying to learn like how to get up to that standard of like, oh yeah, like this sounds like a really polished track.
Yeah, I can just chime in and say that for one thing, the film noir track is my favorite out of the ones for Sharn.
Oh, hands down. Yep, hands down. I agree.
Yeah, I think that we would not have been able to sell the setting nearly as well if we didn't have Bill on the music for that, because so much of the genre, I guess, that we were playing off of for that expansion was based like around the sights and the sounds of the cities, and also like we were kind of going, we didn't have as much direction in terms of source material, I guess you could say, that we were working off from for that expansion. We had a lot of filling in the blanks because of the module we were using wasn't directly tied to the story we were telling in the same way that the previous expansion was. So I feel like having Bill's music really helped tie everything together and sell the vibe without when we were kind of lacking that sort of like inspiration from a written material.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, anytime, bud.
And then kind of the same question we had for LOTRO. When you do the music for DDO, is it kind of the same process, or do you have a little more freedom on DDO, or does it kind of work the same way?
I mean, the process is pretty much the same. But again, like they ask for wildly different things. Like I can throw in synthesizers, and I can throw in piano, and I can throw in electric guitars, and nobody bats an eye because like that all fits. So yeah, I do have a lot more freedom when it comes to DDO stuff, but at the same time, they also have a much better idea of exactly what they want. So that's where the difficulty comes in just trying to nail that sound.
And kind of going back to my love of soundtracks, that's kind of what I like about the DDO music is it's always vastly different, just from zone to zone or dungeon to dungeon or expansion to expansion. It's like you never kind of get the same back-to-back, which I really appreciate and love, just loving music soundtracks so much.
Right. And yeah, like, I mean, when I heard some of the stuff that they were doing in DDO, I was just like, man, it would be fun to work with synthesizers because, of course, growing up on 70s prog rock, I'm like, man, like, I love synth.
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I just want to say, I want to hear Bill's 17-minute long prog rock opus about the Balrog.
God.
That's what I was just thinking too. We need like a total kind of Hawkwind-esque soundtrack for something. That would be amazing.
My senior project in high school for English class, my best friend and I did like a 20-minute rock opera for Hamlet. And it's absolutely terrible.
Oh, come on.
But it was a lot of fun.
We're gonna say we need to have this released somewhere. We need to hear this. I think.
Yeah, no, I have to see if he has it because I have a disc and it's all scratched. So
that's the worst.
That's amazing though. And I kind of hit it out already, but the music of DDO is so different. And the most recent, other than the Raid, which we'll talk about here in a second, of course, music that you really did was the Feywild, and it was vastly different than anything else. Right. So how did you go about creating the soundtrack for which that hadn't have been easy because the Feywild is a really strange place to begin with.
Right. Yeah. So it was just about a year ago. Knockback approached me and asked me if I wanted to do an expansion for DDO, and they'd be going to Feywild, and I had no idea what that was. And he said, well, we can go in two directions. We can either go with more of a Celtic vibe, or we can go with Tchaikovsky. And like he seemed to be pushing me towards Tchaikovsky, and that's a direction I wanted to go anyway. Tchaikovsky's one of my top 4 classical composers. I've studied his music for a long time. Even if I haven't tried to write in his style, it's still just in me because I just listen to it a lot. So he said, like we'll do the whole thing, Tchaikovsky. So I already have his symphonies. I ended up buying the full score to Swan Lake so I could learn that, and that's actually where the main theme was inspired by. Like Knockback gave me an entire list of Tchaikovsky songs and like exactly which timestamps in which song to listen to because that's the exact style that he wanted for each of these tracks.
Okay.
So I just listened and I'm like, okay, well, how can I fudge this like Tchaikovsky? It was a really fun experience. You're of course limited to a lot of techniques because like there's stuff that you can do now that they didn't do back then in his time. So you're just trying to figure out how you can make it sound authentic and maybe still squeeze in a few things to make it sound like a game soundtrack. And I mean, the whole point too is, and I do this with Lord of the Rings Online too. I want each song to be able to stand on its own. Like you should be able to listen to this part from the game and still enjoy it. You should be able to hear this as you would in any concert hall and have it stand alone as its own musical composition. If it doesn't do that, then I feel like in some way I've failed, because the music should stand alone.
I agree. And it does real well, because I will, hopefully it's not just me that does this, but if it is, so be it. I will just put like the game soundtrack on and, clean around the house or do whatever I'm doing and just have it playing, because it's that good to be able to do that with.
Thank you. I mean,
I did that with the Ravenloft soundtrack. I did that. I did that with Feywild a lot, because Feywild was, I think, I really loved Ravenloft, but Feywild was just so vastly different, and it was just, I enjoyed it out of the game more than I did the Ravenloft soundtrack, I guess, if that kind of makes sense.
I mean, it's always great to hear that, because, yeah, I mean, that was a few months of, actually, no, it was maybe about a month and a half of work, which isn't a long time, but I'm glad that it all came together, and it came together fairly well, so.
And then, is there any particular track you've done for DDO that's your favorite?
I would say probably the Feywild main theme. I actually asked Knockback, I'm like, is this too much like Swan Lake? Like, do you think people will notice? And he's like, some people probably will, but they'll probably just hear it as inspiration. I'm like, okay, I can live with that.
I refer to Pineleaf. Did you notice that? I didn't notice it, but I'm sure Pineleaf probably might have. Yes? No?
I have to note that I don't think I play the music all that loud in DDO, because I know in LOTRO I have it up at so I can hear it, but I don't think I ever got into the habit of doing that in DDO for some reason.
So then you probably have no idea what I'm talking about when I'm like, my God, this song is awesome.
Yeah, I think
Poor Pineleaf. Every time I'm like,
yeah,
like, hush, I like this part of the song. Hold on just a minute. Okay, you're good.
I'm perfectly still before we go on to the next part of this.
That's right, exactly. Like, do not move, because if you move, it's going to go to a different track. Just stay right there.
Oops.
And before you know it, there's combat music.
Right, exactly. It's like, you move.
Yeah. One of the problems I had was that for a long time, I was avoiding as much as possible playing the music, even in LOTRO, because I do YouTube videos. I was always worried that I was worried for a long time that no matter what Cordovan says, that somebody's going to start putting strikes against me for.
Yep.
Which I was
good though.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, I was going to ask, what is SSG's official stance on that?
Oh yeah, there is no copyright action that should be taken against anyone making a LOTRO video on YouTube. Period.
Because you guys quote unquote own the music, because Bill creates it, correct? So
yeah.
Okay.
The only place we've ever historically run into it is with some of the older, like significantly older Warner Brothers owned kind of licensed, music that ended up getting an official soundtrack and ended up getting on, Spotify and all that sort of thing. And we've had a couple of false positives about that. But even then, I haven't seen one in probably 4 or 5 years. So we should be basically all clear at this point. If anyone does run into an issue, please get in touch with me. We should be able to sort it out.
I think the last time I saw it was somebody was posting Mordor soundtracks. And I guess that because those were Chance Thomas owned, they didn't want them posting his music because he was actually selling the soundtracks. But for most of the stuff we do, we own it, and it's our right to distribute it. And as far as I know, people can use it in their videos.
Which is good, because I'm getting pretty close to Minas Tirith right now, and by the time we get to Pelennor, I think that's another expansion ahead. I don't think I've ever heard the Battle of Pelennor Fields with the music before.
It's good.
Yeah, so because I've been hearing it, about the nice epic sound you have in there, and I haven't yet heard it.
Well, see, now you can see.
Matt Harwood did an amazing job with the with all of that Pelennor stuff.
And is that the same for DDO? We can use that in the videos too and be okay?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
On the DDO side, the only time I've ever seen an issue that got to me was some of the ambient kind of just wind sound occasionally procs a false positive. And that's just a matter of usually a quick email or whatever, and that gets taken care of.
So they can just contact you if they would happen, if something would come up. Okay, perfect. Let's transition into the new raid that's upcoming for DDO. Lamania just launched yesterday with the raid on it, and I must say this is a different type of raid than we've ever had, because you basically gave us a musical is what it boils down to. So how the heck did that come about? And could you kind of explain what I mean by it's a musical? Because that's the best way I can describe it.
That was kind of our intention. So there's a bit of a backstory here, which is that for many, many years, other devs on the team wanted to see if they could do a musical dungeon of some kind. It's the type of idea that just kind of floated around, and it like either didn't fit or people couldn't figure out mechanics for it and stuff like that. And it just kind of never really got into like an actual phase of, hey, we're going to do this now, for many years. And then I come along, I hear from Knockback when he's like first kind of like leading our story meetings around Feywild and everything like that, talking about how Here's Him is basically like a god of music. And I was like, you know what? The musical theater nerd in me is demanding a musical dungeon. If I can't do it myself, I must beg one of you to do it. And lucky enough for me, it kind of like the gears clicked for the first time in a way that they hadn't been able to before. Like we had Bill, someone who actually knew something about music and who could help with the instrumentals. And not that I'm claiming to be like a professional songwriter or anything, but I kind of went forward with the bravado of I will learn to do this if I have to because I want to. And kind of with that sort of like partnership and with Orc's awesome quest design and like creative vision for how this would go, we were kind of able to meld this kind of impossible seeming, not to be too dramatic about it, like idea into something that was actually tangible. And we've just been really excited about seeing how players feel about it.
So how did you guys come up with, we'll talk about the lyrics that you came up with, because I think, Artemist, you wrote most of those or all of them?
I wrote all of the lyrics, yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about those in a second. But Bill, how'd you come up with the music? And did you guys kind of work together, or did you come up with the music and then poor Artemist had to like, okay, I got to have lyrics to this stuff now?
Yeah, so when I started on it in December, we were still trying to like iron out what it was going to be, and Torque hadn't given me really much in terms of direction outside of we'll have maybe so many tracks. In the first 10 to 15 seconds of each track will be singing, and then we'll have instrumental stuff, and then it'll go on to phase 2, and then it'll be 10 to 15 seconds of singing, instrumental stuff, blah blah blah. So I just wrote these mock vocal melodies and then put some music after it. And by the time we got back from holiday break, like direction had shifted completely, and it had somehow become like a full-blown verse chorus with instrumental tracks in between. And I was not confident at all how this was going to all work. So I'm thrilled that it actually did, because it's interesting to see the vision just completely shift from what we originally had. And so like I wrote some stuff and I bounced it over to the team, and they had suggestions, and then Artemist came up with some lyrics, so I had something to go off of, and I wrote melodies around that, and I sent it to the team. And this is the part of the process I like so much, because when I have complete control, I'm not fully comfortable. It's nice having people to basically bounce ideas off of, and I flat out told that the melody was too complex. I was writing for VO people who could sing but weren't professional singers, So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, like, I can simplify this. And in the end, it made for like melodies that were a lot more singable. So yeah, it's great to work with a team and bounce ideas back and forth and see what sticks, what they like, what they don't like.
I actually had two bits here I could add to this. And Bill, maybe you can elaborate a bit. But unlike, say, writing a standard 4-minute song that would play in the background while people raid or something, this is actually has different parts that are triggered by the events that the players are doing in the raid. So you had to have a position where, there's flexibility in the way this plays back to the raiders. That also must have posed a little bit of a challenge.
Yep. Yeah. So the way we set it up is you have intro, verse, chorus, bridge, and then you have an ending condition if you win or if you lose. All of the verses and choruses in the bridge all had to have instrumental only versions that could loop. So the way it works is like it'll play through the verse one time, and then it'll switch over to a fully instrumental version that basically takes the melody, builds on it, and then goes off and does its own thing for about a minute and a half and then loops. And it'll do that until you trigger the next phase where it goes into the chorus, and it'll do its thing, go into the instrumental chorus and then loop. And so, yeah, so it was a bit of a headache to basically design how this would all work, but Torque somehow figured it out.
The other bit I was going to mention is you had asked earlier about, why now for the musical raid, as the shorthand is,
right?
I could call it here, and part of that I think has to do with the content of Feywild itself. For those who have played the Fables of the Feywild expansion, a lot of our quests are in the form of stories and tales. The theme that repeats throughout the Feywild is lore and story and that sort of thing. So it lended itself to a presentation, fables of the Feywild, because there's a lot of fables and that sort of thing in it. And so it lended itself to being able to perhaps try something a little bit different, because it fit well with this, magical world of, elves and beasts and everything else that happens in the Feywild. And it actually fits pretty well with the overall themes of what's going on with Hirsum and the rest.
From the theme of it, just from the little bit, I actually haven't got on Lomania to run it yet, but just from the little I've seen on a couple videos, it really kind of reminded me, if any of you are familiar with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Once More with Feeling episode, where
yes,
it reminds me of that so much, and that is a very good thing.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that was my direct inspiration or anything, because
I was going to ask you that. Yeah,
that's actually the only episode of Buffy I've ever seen.
That's sad for me now. That's very sad.
I'm sorry. I'll get to it eventually. I had a friend a while back who loved Buffy, and I always loved musicals, but I wasn't super into watching Buffy myself. And she was like, "Okay, can I sit you down and at least make you watch this one episode?" And I was like, all right, sure. And I guess I've just been kind of like fascinated with musical episodes of that kind. So I can understand there potentially being some crossover.
So how did you, I mean, Buffy aside, how did you come up with like, okay, these are the lyrics I'm going to do for this?
So it actually, the brief kind of changed, it kind of like, it shifted a lot, I guess you could say, over the like several months of development time and like planning. I think we first started talking about doing the raid as a musical like in the spring, like several months before the raid is actually coming out, like almost up to like a year. Actually, that's kind of scary.
I would have loved to have been in on that meeting. It's like, let's do a musical. What?
Yeah, honestly.
You're going to do a what?
It's like high school. You do a musical in the spring.
Right. True. Yeah. Sure.
Fun memories. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but I was definitely one of the theater kids in my high school.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, heck yeah. So it kind of shifted, like I was saying, and at first we weren't sure how much the lyrics were going to be tied into game mechanics, and that was kind of something that we vacillated on back and forth, or I should say that Torque was kind of puzzling through as he was coming up with the format of the raid, what you were going to do, and like how it would go. And he ultimately made the decision that it would be better to have it more of like world building and story to like kind of give the players a reason why they're there rather than tell them what to do, if that makes any sense. So that was my first initial direction, like when we finally nailed that down. And then talking to the guys, the idea kind of became the two central characters, the Demigod and the Dryad from the title, Hawthorne and Hearsam. We wanted them to have a connection that was beyond just your typical, I'm the good guy, so I'm going to defend the innocent people, and I'm the bad guy, and I'm going to do what I want. We wanted it to be deeper than that, so we were talking about it a bit, and we kind of came up with the idea that they have like a romantic history with each other from centuries ago, because they're both extremely old magical beings, and there was a lot of room for kind of taking in inspiration from a lot of, I guess you could say, like, widely popular storytelling techniques when we started to go in the romantic route, going in that direction. So that was kind of the thing that kind of made it click for me, is establishing the connection between them and then thinking about how Hearsam would be in a romantic relationship and just kind of rolling my eyes.
Which is understandable.
Yeah. So that was just kind of Hawthorne's character. I was like, okay, we're going to tear this guy down as much as we can.
So how long did it take you to like write this?
I want to say, well, I had a couple of ill-fated drafts that came out over the course of development before we had really nailed things down. I wrote this one like complete song in what feels like a fever dream of an afternoon in the spring that we just kind of completely scrapped because it became useless when we changed directions.
Oh, no.
It probably wasn't that good either. Like, I didn't really proofread it. Like, I don't know. But coming back to it when I had the brief and, like, everything was kind of nailed down, I want to say a couple weeks. Like, I don't know how relatable an experience this is to other writers, but inspiration comes and goes, man. Sometimes you sit down to write and you just kind of like you're like banging your head against your desk trying to make it work and nothing's happening and you have to just kind of shift gears and do something else. And then other days it just all pours out of you like super fast. So it was kind of a balance between the days where it was rough going and the days where it was smooth sailing until I had something to show the rest of the day.
So was this the first time you've done anything like that? I mean, other than I'm guessing probably in high school, since you said you were a musical theater, you probably did. But I'm assuming for DDO, this is the first time you've ever done anything like this, correct?
Well, actually, my one other claim to fame, there's this one sword in the Feywild who sings. He's the singing sword. And the story there is he was so annoying that a giant stuck him into that rock. And now he terrorizes anyone who pulls him out of it. So kind of a reverse Excalibur. And that was kind of my first foray into adding something musical into it.
Okay.
I'm kind of mentioning that like as a joke. It wasn't like a really serious project or anything. I was just told, or like, I guess like you could say like Knockback and I were brainstorming different landscape encounters for the Feywild expansion. And we thought it would be really funny to do like a sort of reversal of that trope. And we were like, what if we do something like the song that never ends and just have you annoy him, like have them annoy the player to death. And that was a lot of fun. But other than that, for sure, this is the first musical sort of thing that I've done.
That is just amazing. So, is there anything else either one of you want to say about the raid? It's totally different than anything, just the style-wise, than we've ever had. So it's going to be interesting to see how the players like it from that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to see music take front and center in a game. Like I can't really remember too many times that music has played the central role of an actual story or raid. I mean, maybe it has. I know it did in Final Fantasy VI with the opera scene, and that's one that's always stuck with me. But in terms of the online space, I don't know of any times that something like this has been done. Again, I could be wrong.
Yeah, we were talking about that before you actually came in the chat, and the only thing we could come up was with the Final Fantasy, but that's not an online game. So
right,
I don't think an MMO's ever done it.
Right. So I mean, I feel like we're breaking ground. I feel like we're doing something truly unique in the online space. Whether or not players enjoy it and appreciate it, I hope that they do. It was a lot of work, and I'm glad to see it all come together. And yeah, it's just been an interesting experience to be part of. So
Let me do my job as a member of the marketing team here briefly to say, if you are hearing this raid and you do want to check it out, here's how you can actually do it. Anyone who has Fables of the Feywild, any edition of it, will have access to the raid when it comes out. We're currently targeting the near future for its release. Stay tuned for a formal release date. But anyone who has Fables of the Feywild will be able to run the raid. There is no flagging necessary for the raid either. So you don't have to go through the entirety of the Fables of the Feywild storyline in order to run the raid, although it will lend itself to a better understanding of what is going on in the story of the raid itself. And you can just go to DDO.com, go to the new DDO market, and that's where you can find Fables of the Feywild.
And
Of course,
go ahead, Pineleaf.
of course, there's always the thing about being capable of finding enough players in which to do a raid with in order to be able to do it.
Well, sure, but you know,
Minor little detail.
if people are used to raids, I don't think that'll be an issue. So, so yeah, like I said, it's coming out. You said soon. Official date will be soon, but it's on the Mania now. I'm going to try to get this out right away. So, when is Lamania going down? It probably will be down by the time this is out.
Thursday night. Yeah, it'll probably be down, and then we'll have a second Lamania preview.
Okay.
I'm going to guess next week, maybe not, but probably.
Okay, so
And,
you can probably look for it on the Mania next weekend then, because I doubt I'll get this out in time for it to still be up, but we'll see.
And then, we are targeting the anniversary time frame here for the release of the raid.
Okay.
I'm just not ready to give you an exact form.
Right. No, that makes total sense. Artemis, is there anything else you want to add about your work that you did on this?
Yeah, I guess what I find so kind of interesting and encouraging is that I was able to kind of flex a muscle that didn't really get much work or attention, if that makes any sense when it comes to writing this song. Like, I have written a lot of poetry just like in my personal time, like as a hobby. And then for Feywild, of course, someone needed to write all those riddles. And all of those like little ditties that rhymed. I had a lot of fun with that. People would just kind of send me, hey, I need something that rhymes for this quest because riddles are in fairy tales. Can you do this? And it would just kind of like be the highlight of my day when people would send me those. And I kind of got to take that to a bigger scale with coming up with the song for the raid. And it's just been a complete joy to work with Bill and the other guys on this. And regardless of whether the raid is regardless of whether or not the raid is one of the first experiences like that in an online space, I just hope that it's something that sticks with people and that they kind of feel an attachment to going forward, into the future, the way future of DDO and everything like that. Not to wax poetic too much, but I'm just happy that I got to be a part of it, I guess I should say.
That
and I'm glad that Artemist wrote the words because I'm not a lyricist by any means. So it was nice to actually have good lyrics to go off of. Makes it easier.
you were probably like, oh, thank God I don't have to write lyrics for this.
Yes.
I'll just do the music. I'm good with the music.
I'm like, who's this Herson guy? Hawthorne, who the heck is that?
Well, thank you, Artemis and Bill, for joining us tonight. I appreciated you taking some time out of your evening to talk about LOTRO and DDO and the great music you guys do for the games.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.